Hello, good morning, everybody. Uh, as you all know, today we are going to listen from Comrade Ravi Sinha uh, about the current global situation, especially the world that is getting shaped under the unprecedented war situation that's going on in the West Asia, especially after this aggression from America and Israel on Iran, and the way Iran is retaliating and Iran is defending itself. It has opened up many uh, new processes and developments. We need to understand the world in this context, and also we need to try to understand how the world is shaping and how India is faring in this newly evolving situation. So I request Ravi to make his presentation.
Thank you, Bhargav. Thank you all for coming. Today's discussion is going to be somewhat unprepared, extempore, even though I will have slides. So it's not a well-prepared, well-thought-out presentation for two reasons. One is from our own side, we had to prepare for this study circle in a hurry because we thought that as most of NSI activities, they do not have very direct impact on anything, including our own lives, So we tend to postpone it or cancel it often. So we were discussing in our group that we should try to get back to the discipline of having one study circle every month, So partly, we are discussing this thing today because of our internal reasons. I think this needs better preparation than I have been able to do. And the second thing is that the war situation in West Asia, is developing every day, and the final decision, one way or the other, is yet to come. And we cannot, in our kind of discussion, we cannot be a substitute for news bulletin. That you will be able to follow the news much better than I will, so, and there are better sources, so as the situation is developing, and developing very fast, and this is most likely going to result in epoch-making changes, in the world, maybe a good dividing line later on. Historians will see a good dividing line between the existing world order and a new world order, So we are not going to discuss as much about what is happening in the war itself. And since the final the conclusion is yet to come, so whatever we are going to say is going to be tentative. For these two reasons, what I will try to do will be very rudimentary, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence if I appear to be stay at the level of high school common sense or high school general knowledge, So most of the most of the information part or will be very much at the level of general knowledge. And then towards the end, when we come to the substantive point of how we see the world situation in the light of this war, then we will be too general, So the detailed part will be very rudimentary, and the main aspects or the main conclusions that we are able to decipher in what is happening will be too general. So I will, with that caveat, let me begin. So this, of course, the background to our discussion is the war that started with full-scale American-Israeli attack on Iran on February 28. And this happened, for the second time while negotiations were going on, or at least being enacted from the American side. In the middle of those negotiations, just like last year's 12-day war, they started the war. So for the second time, diplomacy as a deception for surprise attack. The first time was last year's 12-day war. And the causes, it is much talked about every day. There are discussions of it on the social media, and I don't watch the news media, but I'm sure on the news media, but more on social media of Netanyahu's blackmail of Trump, to invade Iran, But that does not mean that US is in the war just because of the blackmail, by blackmail, the Epstein files and everything else, the way the ruling class, has come out, with its nature, in recent times, especially in the West, But that blackmail is not the only reason why this war is taking place. This is also part of the longer term strategy of US, which has taken Israel as the linchpin, of the empire in West Asia. And the Arab states, of the Gulf, for example, Gulf Cooperation Council, the 6 or 7 small but rich countries, sheikdoms, they are the second tier. They have acted as the second tier of the post of American empire. And Iran has often been seen as the last obstacle to be removed from the path of American strategy and design for the West Asia, but for the world as a whole. And if you go into the history of last few decades, in various ways, sometimes through war, sometimes through coercion, other obstacles that used to be have been removed, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and so on. But what has come as a big surprise, especially to the empire, is that Iran, despite the physical devastation, seems to have won the war, already, even though it is being devastated and it is getting the very severe blow to itself, just by surviving and just by retaliating, resisting, in a way, it has won the war. And US and Israel, are now trying to find a way to wriggle out. Of course, US is trying to find a way to wriggle out. I'm not sure about Israel, what their design is. It often one wonders that if US gets out of the war and Iran says that it will decide when to stop the war, then what happens to Israel, and why is Israel so confident of its survival, and its its determination to go all the way to destroy Iran, And then we know, the closure or partial closure of a Strait of Hormuz, or Iranian control, let us say, of a Strait of Hormuz, is creating, worldwide, economic crisis, and a disaster is looming for the world economy. And this, as the underpinning of our discussion today will be that this seems to accelerate the emergence of the New World Order. What do we mean by new world order? After the end of the Cold War and demise of the Soviet Union, um, America has been the sole superpower, and the world is often described as being unipolar. So America is the sole superpower, but now it is getting clear by the day that it is a declining superpower. You know, and the beginning of the end of unipolar world that started sometimes in 2010s, is very much, on the cards. Um, this, of course, has been um, um, driven to a large extent by emergence of China as an economic and technological superpower, and also as a great military power. Secondly, Russia also has asserted itself, re-emergence of Russia as a great military power after the debacle of 1990s, after the fall of the Soviet Union and disintegration of the of creation of many republics out of erstwhile Soviet Union. Russia went through a very severe crisis in the 1990s, including, some, for a country which was the second superpower of the world, to go through, uh, very, go through humiliation at the hands of America, and also internally great crises, of, even feel, even starvation, even people, hundreds of thousands of Russians died, in 1990s. That doesn't get talked about, and so Russia has re-emerged, in the new century, and has become stronger and stronger. And despite all the Western powers egging on the Ukraine war and trying to create problem for Russia, in fact, dreaming of breaking Russia apart. Despite that, Russia has re-emerged more and more as a great military power. And Ukraine war, instead of weakening Russia, it has weakened Europe, and has resulted in divisions inside NATO. NATO seems to be unraveling. And this has also led to not exactly a strategic alliance between Russia and China, but a great strategic friendship between Russia and China. The new world order also seems to arise then, apart from decline of America, emergence of China and Russia, also accompanying decline of Europe. And India, we have to talk about India because we are, Indians, but India does gets talked about, another important pole of the new world order. But India has not behaved, appropriately for an emergent power, and in fact, I will argue that it has made a mockery of itself, and the way things are, the way media is, the way political discourse is, it doesn't get talked about much in India, or it does get talked about partially, but India is being laughed at, in what it has done in recent, times, and especially after the way it has behaved around this war in West Asia. You will remember that Indian Prime Minister visited Israel just 2 days before Israel and America started the war. And the most surprising emergence has been that of Iran, a much smaller country than India. India is 150 crore. They are around 10 crore, maybe one third the size of India, in area. But Iran has emerged not exactly right now as a great power. Iran is being devastated, but in a more um, um, in a deeper sense, Iran has emerged as a courageous power, as a moral power, and it has if India has snatched uh, ignominy out of glory. Iran seems to have done the opposite. It has snatched glory out of this crisis. So the way the world is shaping up, at least one can kind of guess, or see the outline that in the immediate and interim period, it seems to be that a world of three great powers, US, China, and Russia, uh, 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 is in the offing, is coming into existence. And the two missed opportunities are India and Europe. They haven't risen up to their potential. And a surprise emergence of Iran as a great power in West Asia and a significant power, in the new world order. So what I will do is now, as I was telling you, that um, it will be general knowledge, high school level general knowledge kind of thing. I will show you a lot of maps and some data, a few numbers, so that you keep in mind the basic facts, for the discussion. All this will be known to you. Nothing is new or nothing is, requires any great deal of research. These are all picked up largely from Wikipedia and such sources. But this is the general area, the war and its neighborhood. I don't know whether, I hope you can see the maps. If you are on your laptop, it will be easier. I don't know how much you can see on your phone screen. So you see let me see. So this, of course, is the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman. This is the Strait of Hormuz, much talked about the Strait of Hormuz. And you see the countries around. This is Iran on one side of the Persian Gulf, and mostly Saudi Arabia on the other side. But there are other, this Emirates, for example, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and Iraq is bordering Iran, and this is where you have the real culprit, Israel, um, and north of Israel is Lebanon, where also the war is taking place. And if you come to south, near the Red Sea, then you have Yemen. You must have noticed that Yemen is also fighting on the side of Iran. So this is the area. This is the area. And this area, this map attracted my attention. This is a map of most of Asia part, and this also part of Africa, eastern part of Africa. This is the map from 1 AD, around the time of Christ, and most of the political developments, or political happenings in the world were concentrated in this area. So you see, I just wanted to show it to know the context of this area where the war is taking place. This was the, of course, this is 1 AD, 2000 years ago. So Persia was part of the Parthian Empire, but Persian Empire has been around for, almost 3000 years, in various forms. That's Iran of today. And so you see the empires are this Parthian Empire, and what you don't see on your left side is the Roman Empire, part of Roman Empire. Other than that, India was a major civilization. China, Han Dynasty was a major civilization, and most of other places you see, mostly as various tribes, various native communities, not politically organized, in form of empires or kingdoms that much. So this is an old area where this thing is taking place. The three major civilizations of Asia, you can say, from ancient times will be the Chinese civilization, Indian civilization, and the Persian civilization. this is Iran. I mean, you don't have to go into the details of the map. It is too detailed a map, all the cities and districts of Iran. Uh, and these are some basic facts about Iran. In total area, it is the 17th largest country of the world. Its population, 2025 estimate is around 92.4 billion. That is 9.25 crores. Um, and GDP, don't you know I don't want to get caught into a lot of numbers, but roughly, the area, population, and GDP, just take one number, the nominal number, not the PPP number. I will refer mostly to that. It is the 42nd largest economy in the world, and the total GDP is 356 billion US dollars, at the exchange rate. And per capita GDP at the nominal, that is exchange rate, is $4,000 per capita, among the poor countries, despite all its natural wealth of oil and gas and so on. It remains a poor country because it has been sanctioned for several decades, and it has all kinds of headaches have been created for it. So these are the basic features of Iran. Now let us come to Israel. The map looks larger because the scale is different, but Israel is a very small country, and you see this is, it has the coastline of Israel is on the Mediterranean Sea, on the west of Israel is Egypt, this is the West Bank part, which Israel occupies. Well, whole Israel is basically occupied Palestine, but even in as it exists, and this is the Gaza where the genocide has taken place. Very small, cramped area, but now totally flattened, and at least 70,000 people, including many, many thousands of children, have been killed, in especially after October 7, 2023. On east of Israel is Jordan. Jordan is completely caved into Israel. It's ironically, most of exiled Palestinians live in Jordan, but Jordan is most closely allied with Israel and US. Um, on north of Jordan is the Syrian, Arab Republic, which has been Syria, basically, which has been devastated, and being ruled by an ISIS, terrorist, that's that is the end point of what Americans have been trying to do, So that is that area. This is where the war is taking place. I mean, this is where the culprit of the war exists, that Israel. And Israel at a glance, it's a very small country, 8,000 square miles, or 20,000 square kilometers or so, 148th, in a country, only very small countries of small islands and so on are smaller than that, Population is about 10 million. So it is roughly one-tenth, the population is roughly one-tenth of Iran, And it is a fairly rich country, even though it is small, its population is only 10 million or so. I mean, out of those 10 millions, I think, 2 million have fled, because of the war. But anyway, that's the population. And the GDP nominal is 610 billion. Per capita basis, 60,000 US dollars per capita. So it's a fairly rich country. These are the GCC states. So other than on the one side of the Persian Gulf, you have Iran. On the other side are these Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, and Oman, they form the GCC, And so this is the map of that area in black. And this is the political map of that area and in the vicinity. You see again, once again, just to keep in mind where the war is taking place. This is Iran, this is Saudi Arabia, these are the Gulf countries. Egypt here, Lebanon, Israel, Syria, And so you basically, keep in mind this general area and how far they are from here. We are here, this is India, this is Pakistan, this is Afghanistan, and so on. The GCC numbers you can see at a glance. Again, even though very few numbers, very selective numbers, but it's still maybe too much for you to keep in mind, for our preliminary discussion. But one notice that, Qatar, for example, which is one of the smaller countries in the GCC, is the richest one. Per capita basis, 83,000 or $84,000 per capita. That is the level of prosperity of Qatar, and then Kuwait is UAE is the second one, second richest. Then there is Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, which as a country is the richest, $1 trillion economy on per capita basis. It is 30,000, not so rich, and so on. So just keep these numbers in mind, and in the discussion part, if you need, we can come back to what if something comes, some fact needs to be brought into discussion. So just summarizing, the size of Israeli economy, $610 billion US dollars, is roughly double of Iranian economy, which is $356 billion. And per capita GDP of Israel, 60,000, is 15 times that of Iran, which is 4,000. So Israel is a much smaller but much richer country. And of course, this also does not still brings the actual situation into full view, because Israel's strength mainly comes from America. Of course, they are technologically very advanced. They are almost a military society, but always engaged in wars of one or the other. Always occupying other people's land. And into what is known as, always engaged in what is known as the Greater Israel Project, in which they openly claim that everything between Nile and Euphrates, is theirs, and they will claim it as Greater Israel. The size of GCC economy, which is roughly $2,000 billion, is 6 times the economy of Iran, just to compare what Iran is pitted against. The size of Saudi economy itself, 1,000 billion, 1 trillion, is 3 times that of Iran. And compare it with the American giant. American economy is $30,000 billion, $30 trillion, roughly 100 times that of Iran. Is this American giant stands behind Israel plus GCC, and they are all directly or indirectly, waging war against Iran. And despite all this, Iran is winning. Even though it is taking a devastating blow, it is being flattened, but by raining bombs. But still, Iran is winning. So, what are the reasons? Is it nation? Is it civilization? A 5,000-year-old civilization? Is it its territory? Is it its national genius as a strategist? Is it military? Is it culture? Is it religious history? In general, is it people? What is the reason for this Iran, pitted against such powerful countries and monstrous forces, still is winning? Just to show you, American map, this is America. So let us, briefly, after dealing with the West Asia, where the war is taking place, let us briefly look at global comparisons. So first, US. This is the third largest country in the world. Only two large in area. Only two countries larger than US. That is Russia and Canada. Its population is around 350 million, 341 million. That is 34 crore. And it is the largest economy in the world in nominal terms. In nominal GDP is nominal terms, the GDP is the largest, 30 trillion, $30,000 billion. Of course, in PPP terms, China has become a larger economy, but in nominal terms, that is the number we are using for our discussion. China is the second largest economy. So this is about US. This is the map of China. Again, I mean, I just I thought that even though you know it very well, still casting a glance at the map maps will be nice to have, just to have a mental picture. This is China, and the numbers are that it is third or fourth largest country in the world, depending on area. US was third, but in some, there are some small disputed territories and so on, depending on that, it becomes third or fourth. So it is more or less same size as US in area. Population, of course, it is the second most populous country in the world after India. 1.4 um, 1.4 billion people, 140 crore, people. And GDP in nominal terms it is the second largest economy in the world, 19 trillion dollars. Here it is second largest economy in nominal GDP terms. This is Russia. Russia is the largest country in the world. It covers a significant portion of the landmass of the planet. The numbers are, it is the largest country, of course, in area, but its population is not that large, 146 million people, 14.6 crore people. Roughly 40% of American population. And it is the ninth largest economy in nominal dollar terms, $2.5 trillion. And then I think is Europe. Europe, is not one unified political entity. I have just, because we are not going to have time to discuss each and every country. Europe is very diverse and in its politics as well as in an economy. But roughly, if we have a general picture of Europe, including Great Britain, so it is mostly European Union plus Great Britain. This is the map of that. And the numbers are that if it were one country, if entire Europe was one country, including Great Britain, then it will be the sixth largest country in the world. That's the area. Its population would be is 745 million. That is 74.5 crores. That will be the third most populous country in the world. And the nominal GDP would be, if you add up all the countries that I have collected here as Europe, if you add that up, the nominal GDP will be 28 trillion, dollars, which is, I think this is my guess is that this is wrong. Third, the nominal GDP, US is the first country that is 30 trillion. Second will be this, second, there is some wrong in this, something wrong with this number, I will have to check. So 28 trillion GDP is just behind 30 trillion of US, which is the number one economy. China is 19 trillion. So actually China should be third and Europe will be second, Yeah, I will correct that. And then of course we have our own country. This is India. Just for completeness sake, if you have if you haven't seen the map of India, so here is the map of India. And here are the numbers. This is the seventh largest country in terms of area and the most populous country in the world. 23 estimate is 1.428 billion, which is 143 crores. But now, I mean, it must be inching close to 150 crores. And in nominal GDP terms, it's an economy of 4 trillion here, the $4 trillion, which is the fourth largest economy in the world. And per capita, it is 2,800, which is a fairly, poor country or lower middle income group kind of country. So let us get back to Iran. Why is it winning against all odds? So I have just, hopefully more things will come in our discussion after this presentation. But here I have just collected in very general terms or very general features. So history could be one reason, in the sense that it has a very long history, millennia of empire, state, wars, culture, religion, civilization, all feeding into the makeup of a people. Even in the news bulletins that you see, often you hear commentators saying that, Iran is not going to go anywhere because it has been there, for 5,000 years. It is one of the oldest and most glorious civilizations, excelling in art, culture, philosophies, and knowledge. A nation, has been forged, through many twists and turns of history. But, in more recent times, the humiliation of 19th century and first half of 20th century is similar to what Chinese call their century of humiliation. Um, most of 19th century and 20th half of 20th century in their case too, but similar period for Iran. Then followed by anti-colonial nationalism. You remember Mossadegh being the prime minister in early 1950s, and in 1953 overthrown by Britain and US together, their conspiracy, because he decided to nationalize the oil wealth of Iran. Um, After his overthrow, Iran reverted back to neocolonialism. Shah ruled from 1953 to 1979. In 79, what is known as Islamic Revolution took place, although when the revolution was taking place and people were fighting and sacrificing their lives, it was not just that the Islamists were fighting for revolution. Actually, inside Iran, in equal number or in equal strength, or maybe even more, leftists and liberals were fighting for the revolution. But after the revolution, we will get into that, hopefully, I think in our discussion, or even maybe it will come even in in my presentation. After that, the way history uh, uh, progressed, in Iran, the mullah regime that came to power in 79 was very rough with the leftists and liberals. They were often massacred, they were suppressed brutally. So that, and then immediately in 1980, the Iran-Iraq war, which was basically a Western war against Iran. Saddam Hussein, who was eliminated, in the early part of the new century. At that time, he was egged on and he was supported and given all the, money and military hardware, by the West, to attack Iran. So it was the most critical, devastating period for Iran, 1980 to 88. This was the most brutal war, and there are estimates that some 500 thousand, 5 lakh or 7 lakh people were killed, in that war of 8 years. And it was it unleashed immense sacrifices on Iran, And because of that war, a kind of nationalism that came to fore, and the kind of nation that was forged, just after the revolution of 1979. We will discuss this point more about, how the Islamists and conservatives on the one hand, and the liberals and progressives on the other hand, they had very different notion of their society, and how in the conservative and religious side, nation was underlined, and on the other side, liberals and progressives, what kind of society you will have, a modern society encouraging the flourishing of the individual, society based on rights and justice, So this we will discuss more. In fact, this will be one of our main points, that the way the world politics is evolving, um, in this conceptualization of mobilizing a whole people through the objectives or mission of creating a powerful nation, versus creating a good society. This tension we will always see, and we will see which one right now is gaining the upper hand. Which of these two ideas of mobilizing a country or a people is gaining the upper hand? So we will come to that. So that nation, history of Iran as a nation is a key part, that we will have to take into consideration when we try to understand why Iran is able to do what it is able to do. Of course, related to that is the state, and Iran is a strong and well-organized state, forged through revolution, wars, and isolation. Most of the time in recent decades, Iran has been isolated, and it has to fend for itself. It does everything more or less by itself, even though currently there are talks of Russia and China helping Iran from the back door in the war, which I believe, must be true. But it is not that, all these countries, all these nations have their own national interest, and none of them are driven by uh, the mission or the urge to fight on the right side, fight on the side of the oppressed. They have their national calculations. So even though Iran is getting help from a few major forces in the world, still by and large, it is all by itself. And all by itself, it is confronting the monstrous attack that it is facing. Its economy is largely, because of natural wealth, basically, oil and gas, but minerals too. But because it has been under sanctions and it has been forced to act as a war economy, prepare for last 20 years or more, 30 years, for this war that it knew will be imposed upon it. So the even though it has natural wealth, but it has been forced to um, remain isolated under sanctions. And because of this, a strong emphasis has been on autonomy and self-sufficiency. And because of this, um, the economy, which is a capitalist economy, but still the capital has been controlled by national interest through a strong state. This will become an important part in our general discussion, concluding discussion, when we come to those countries in the world who are succeeding compared to those countries in the world who are on the decline. So this, and one factor will be, this is a capitalist world where top of world capital is largely monopoly, largely financialized, largely technological, and yet the countries which are succeeding, I am going ahead of myself, but which are succeeding are the ones where a strong state is able to control, and guide, capital, and it is not allowed to proceed in purely self-interest. It is harnessed somehow into the project of nation building. Those are the economies that are succeeding. So we will see that nation will become important for mobilizing a people. A state will become a strong state will become important for mobilizing the people as well as controlling capital. And this combination, works best for those countries which are not saddled with the constraints and compulsions of electoral democracy or liberal democracy. Coming back to Iran, again, last point is modernity, which is a largely modern society, despite theocratic state. Although liberals and progressive have faced repression and defeat at the hands of the Islamic State. So these are the main large-scale features of Iran. So in this road to victory, I mean, if we assume that Iran is winning, road to victory has been paved with good things as well as with bad things. And I have just put here 3 points, which are good and bad. I will leave somewhat ambiguous, to be clarified in our discussion. So Islamic revolution and theocratic state have forged a nation suffused with civilizational identity and religious fervor. So Islamic revolution leading to theocratic state, Islamic state, and they have been able to put together a strong national sense, largely you can say national unity too, even though there are divisions inside Iranian society, in which the civilizational identity of Iran has been deployed into creating the nation, and also the religious fervor. I mean, you must have seen that when in the first day itself, 28th of February, when the attack took place, and when dozens of top leaders were killed, in the first wave of attack, people came out in Tehran and all cities, people mourning the loss of their leaders, people who were, you could see the grief on their faces, and yet you could see the determination and fearlessness on their faces. To some extent, the Shia tradition of suffering and sacrifice has been roped into the national unity in face of this acute aggression and adversity. Under the conditions of external threat and isolation, a strong state has successfully curbed capital and deployed it largely into a nationalist project. I talked about it in the previous slide, but just to summarize, so this is the second part, the strong state. So nation is the first part, which is driven by civilizational identity. We will discuss probably the positive part. Religious fervor, probably not so positive part, but is still roped into a positive project. Then the second part is controlling capital harnessing capital into a nationalist project. And what I mentioned, the third point is as I mentioned, this tension between need for a good society and need for the strong mobilized nation. This tension between the need for a good society as signified by rights, freedom, modernity, flourishing of the individual on the one hand, and a strong, unified, and mobilized nation on the other, has been resolved at the cost of suppressing liberals and progressives, often brutally, and invariably taking recourse to religious conservatism. So the strong nation, which is at the forging of a strong nation, which is unified and mobilized to face the enemy, face a monstrous enemy and external aggression, that has been done at the cost of suppressing the liberals and progressives, which emphasize a good society rather than a strong nation. Good society as exemplified by rights, freedom, modernity, and flourishing of the individual. So with this description of the situation in Iran, let us briefly move I mean, I'm getting close to the conclusion of the presentation. Let us briefly look at who is in the winning in the world today. The world is in transition, as I indicated, from the old world order, unipolar world order, dominated by America, or, hegemonized by America, that is making way for a, rudiments or outlines of a new world order. And the main feature of that new world order is that these three countries have come out well. Basically two countries, China and Russia, but in the light of the new war, Iran too. China, the success behind China, its emergence as a superpower that can challenge in the Americans and their empire, uh, is a strong civilizational state. China is a strong civilizational state, free from the handicaps of liberal democracy. We will discuss it more in the discussion part. This may sound strange to you, but I am saying that liberal democracy brings a lot of handicaps. So it is free from the handicaps of liberal democracy. Capital has been roped into the nation's project, and it has benefited from the legacy of revolution and socialism, as well as a people, the Chinese people, who have been made by an entire civilization. Somehow that ancient civilization lives in the actually existing people today. And that translates into a strength for China, as opposed to, as later on I will argue, partly, that Indian civilization is also an ancient civilization. And in some ways, Indian civilization also lives partly in the actually existing Indians today. But that does not translate into strength of India necessarily, or only strength of India necessarily, as it has happened in the case of China. For the China ancient civilizational blood that flows into the, metaphorically speaking, into the veins of people of China, the civilization that flows into the people of China, that is largely has been turned into a strength for themselves. It was not always the case. For millennia, China was not in a great shape, or for many centuries, China was not in a great shape. So civilization by itself does not ensure glory. But civilization can be reimagined, redefined, and used for political purposes in such a way that it becomes a strength for a modern nation. So China is the best example of that. Russia has also succeeded, although not as powerful as China, although not as big, large populous nation as China, although not, more or less not as a superpower that China has become, but still it is a great power. It is a strong authoritarian state. Again, especially under Putin. And largely it has managed, even though elections happen and even though it makes noise about being a democracy, but largely it is free from the handicaps of liberal democracy. And capital gradually in the last couple of decades has been partially roped into nation's project, despite the fact that Chinese capital, after Soviet Union fell apart and after all the national assets or people's assets of the country were just plundered and privatized, and in the 1990 Russia went through that tragedy, despite that, which gave rise to oligarchic and criminal kind of capital, of corporations, of capitalists, despite that nature, now increasingly, Russian state has managed to rein in this criminal and oligarchic kind of capital, reform it and place it largely under the nation's project of nation building. And Iran, already we have talked much about it, in this one, that strong theocratic state again, because of its own peculiar reasons, capital roped into the nationalist project, largely free from the handicaps of liberal democracy. This is common feature in all three. Civilizational makeup of a people further unified and steeled in the fire of wars and revolution. And who is losing in the world today? USA. I mean, it is difficult to decide in these three, USA, Europe, and India, which is a bigger loser. USA may be a bigger loser just because it is very big, and it has been the sole superpower. The features that one notices in this declining superpowers is that, of course, it is a rapidly declining world hegemon. And it is a quintessential example of liberal democracy corrupted and controlled by financialized monopolistic capital, which operates in a neoliberal free market with a neoliberal free market ideology. Liberal democracy, USA is the worst example perhaps of liberal democracy bringing out the worst of the society to the fore. Ruling class degenerating into the Epstein class. I'm referring to Epstein files and the kind of, the kind of criminality, are there, in those files. These are all rich and powerful people, and much of the, ruling class of US, degenerating into the Epstein class. No nationalist ideals for mobilization of the people. That is why it has degenerated into, Trump's core vote bank, MAGA and racists, and the empire is trying to save itself by resorting to continuous wars and war crimes. So that is very short description of a very large phenomenon, which is decline of USA. What has happened in Europe is that it has not found a way to get out of the, it has been on a slope declining from its glory in the colonial era, and in between, it has been driven by a combination of capitalism and modernity. I mean, in the what is known as the golden period of capitalism, post Second World War, it appeared as though Europe created the best societies on the planet, welfare societies and half of GDP or 40% of GDP being collected as taxes and then being spent on creating a good society. But all that has run out of steam. And now it is saddled with the worst constraints of liberal democracy. And then there is India. India should not be there with USA and Europe. India is a poor country, is an emergent economy. People talk about India becoming the largest economy by the middle of the century or by the end of the century, and so on. But India is going through a very bad period. It is suffering from the worst of the disease, both of the West and of the South. From the West, in terms of, the drawbacks of liberal democracy in politics and financialized monopolistic capital bordering on criminal capitalists, crony capitalists, that is the disease of the West. And poverty, a society which is where education and health are at a very poor level, and which is driven by very disturbing aspects of pre-modern societies, not necessarily. I mean, if you compare Iran being a religious society and India being a religious society, in India, in Iran, religion is being roped into creating a powerful nation fighting the empire, and in India, religion is being used to create a fascist majoritarian state, and the society kind of reeling under superstition and all kinds of thugs, managing the daily life of the society. So India is saddled with the disease of the West as well as disease of the poor South. Liberal democracy activating the fault lines of the social subterranean. I meant, this communalism, Hindu-Muslim divide being roped into majoritarian fascistic politics, ruling elite and the state easily succumbing to the lightest pressure from the most powerful countries. The behavior of Indian rulers today, the shameful behavior under the pressure from, not even pressure, just indication of pressure from Trump and America, in recent years are the examples. And the way it has been kind of almost blackmailed, into the project of US-Israeli project, in the current war. The Prime Minister going to Israel just 2 days before the war started, and giving a shameful speech, to the Knesset, when he went there on 26th February. And very dubious events like, the Iranian ship being torpedoed by, American submarines, who gave the coordinates of those ships, to be torpedoed, is there is a big question mark, the kind of behavior of India in this war, it's succumbing to, the nefarious, global designs of America and West Asian designs of Israel, is truly shameful for the most populous country and a country that has been touted as the, biggest economy and most powerful country by the end of this century. Capital is becoming criminal, monopolistic, and antithetical to nation building. There is no way capital has any, even dreams or distant idea of building a nation. They make money mostly not by manufacturing things, creating things, but by collecting rents, on properties doled out to them by the state and licenses given to them by the state, and so on. And if they are into oil refineries and other some businesses, that is largely for catering to other nations. Whatever profit is made, becomes private profit. So capital is most delinked from any project of nation building. And all this, add to this, that the ruling class in a poor country like India, tragically resembles the ruling class of the declining superpower USA. So a pristine-like class, can also be visible among the ruling classes of India. So I think this is the last slide, and this slide is just very general. As I told you, either in this presentation, I will have high school level of general knowledge, or some very general features. Hopefully in the discussion, you will bring out the details, and we can discuss it. In India, in some ways, the countries which are losing, USA, Europe all put together, and India, in some ways, India is in the worst situation. And it becomes very difficult for people to believe this statement, because they think that India is a rising economy, which it is. There is no doubt, 5, 6, 7% growth rate and so on. But the way it is developing, the way it is 5% growth rate is not enough for India to catch up with anybody. And on top of that, if that slow growth rate, for a country like India, add to that the severe polarization, inequality of wealth, all that growth takes place, goes to the top 1% or so. Or maybe, if you include, if you are more generous, top 10%, which is the middle class, and the top class. Most of India is suffering, and the quality of life, don't believe every hand having a smartphone. That is not the quality of life. Quality of life in terms of health, education, features of cultivating a capable and cultured individual, all that project has gone down the drain. So India is the worst example out of the 3 major centers of the world which are on the decline. And these people don't believe, because they don't see India as on the decline. And I'm not saying that India is on a long-term decline. I don't dispute that just because India is a very large populous country and will be largely young country, it will become, economically powerful 50 years in future. I don't dispute that. But in order to reach that stage, it is not that you suddenly fly to distant future. The only way to reach distant future is to plow through the immediate future. You can't reach day after tomorrow without going through tomorrow and without going through today. So the challenges are there. How does India proceed from here? And there are deep troubles. So what one has to do, is that in the category of civilization, the Indian civilization, as it exists in the actually existing Indian people, is not a strength. In fact, it has been civilizations have positive features and negative features, and more negative features flow into the blood of India. That requires civilization will have to be reimagined. And we often discuss. I have just stated it here, and those of you who have not followed it, just ignore it. That we have to reclaim the legacy of axial civilization. Ancient India was one of the axial civilizations, which was civilization coming with the best from the top and then percolating down, and connect this axial civilization, greatness of ancient civilization, with the greatness of modernity. That project, is missing in India. And only thing that has saved India so far is the national movement against the British and the modern republic that was created under the inspiration of the national movement and under the leadership of people like Nehru. So that was the saving grace. Other than that, Indian civilization has shown mostly negative features as it lives daily in the daily life of people. And then if we are able to, some elite, some vanguard, arises to redefine and reimagine Indian civilization and takes it down to people, then that will be done through an intellectual cultural revolution from the top. And this is not a substitute for class revolution or class struggle, but along with that, this intellectual cultural revolution from top will be needed in order to redefine Indian civilization and reimagine Indian civilization in such a way that it can be turned into a positive political force of building a good society as well as a strong nation. So that is another challenge. That, as I have counterposed, building a strong, as things are in today's world, building a strong nation and building a good society, they don't go hand in hand. The societies where good society internally has been emphasized, they have gone down the hill as far as mobilizing all the people in a nationalist project is concerned. And whether you believe in nationalism or not, whether you consider nationalism as a positive force or a negative force, where you are a nationalist or an internationalist, still you cannot ignore the fact that nations which have organized themselves under a strong state through mobilizing a civilization and at times even religion, to bring a strong nation, they are holding up. Whereas the societies that were known for example, Europe, creating good societies, emphasizing liberal democracy, emphasizing modernity in the social life, and emphasizing modern education, science, and so on, they creating a good society project, those people have suffered, and the challenge for India is that, can you have both? Can you have a strong nation that mobilizes the people and yet creates a good society that is good for the people? So that will require a nation that has to be rooted in the civilizational soil and has to defeat religious, at the same time, has to defeat religious majoritarian fascistic nationalism, the wrong kind of nationalism that is driven by the ideology of Hindutva. State, can you do a deep restructuring of liberal democracy so that its negative features are diluted, and so that the state is strong enough and has enough support from the people at large so that it can control capital and lead an enlightened egalitarian nationalist project. So this, keep in mind, this is one of the major points that I would like to argue, is that a strong nation, a strong state, while trying to create a good civilization and a good society, that is how the long road ahead for India needs to be defined. Add to that the economy part, and just for completeness sake, I have put it, that's a separate discussion in its own right, is that we have to have welfareism riding on rapidly developing productive forces. And all this is dependent on creating of a vanguard of the society. We on the left have often talked about vanguard of the class. That remains important. That remains of critical importance. And yet we also have to create a vanguard of the nation, vanguard of a civilization, which cultivates a far-sighted and highly capable leadership for the entire society and the civilization. And that struggles to eradicate the twin ailments of dogmatism and populism. By that I mean that if you look, I'm not talking of leftist and left activist or left parties. Right now, I am talking of progressive intellectuals and cultural leaders. They are not thinking hard about the challenges faced by the Indian society and civilization. And in that, even the historians, even the intellectual scholars, they are just like the leftists, they are both dogmatists and populists at the same time. Dogmatists in the sense of imagining Indian civilization as only as, that all of us, different religions and different traditions, have lived together in peace with each other. We have never fought with each other. India is syncretic, and the bhakti kind of ethos. That is what even the most capable scholars, speak in this manner when they talk about Indian civilization. And by populist, I means that nothing is to be done to the people. People do not require social and cultural movements to upgrade and fight, upgrade them culturally and civilizationally, and that people are the best you have as they are, and you should try to go and become one of them. So intellectual and cultural leaders should go to the people, become like them, learn from them, imitate them. This is populism. So even the intellectuals and cultural leaders are afflicted with the same leftist disease of dogmatism and populism. So this is the challenge for India. And I think this is the last slide. Yeah, okay. So I will stop here. And so that's all I have to say to initiate the discussion. Now it is up to you.